uncovering the truth about being right-brained or left-brained and how it impacts education. You probably know someone like this, very creative and always thinking outside the box. They are musical, artistic, and imaginative. On the other side of the spectrum are those who we might say are inside the box. They are technical, mathematical, and analytical. When you ask one of these guys to write a poem, you can guarantee it will rhyme and fit the official poem model. And when you ask this person to follow the instructions to build a bookshelf, it might end up looking more like the Eiffel Tower. The idea that people are either left-brained analyticals or right-brained creatives has been around since the 1950s, when epilepsy patients were treated by the surgical separation of their left and right brain lobes. After treatment, patients were studied, and it was revealed that the brain had specific areas that handled different types of memory function. The right hemisphere of the brain was considered to be the artist, the visual spatial expert, while the left side was the intellectual, the wordsmith. But that is not the end of the story. Even though these left brain, right brain ideas seem to make sense to us, the brain is much more complex than a simple two-sided organ. Even though there are some jobs that each side of the brain controls, the idea that there is an analytical side of the brain and a creative side of the brain is wrong. When the brain is scanned using functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, it has been suggested that for most complex jobs, the brain works as a whole, integrating both sides and networking with many locations. In normal brains, both the left and right sides work together, using a complexity of connections between them. Indeed, although each of us has a unique set of abilities and strengths, we are not strong in only one side of our brains. If that were true, then most of us would have to consider ourselves left-brained. That's because the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. About 90% of people are right-handed and show right side motor dominance. And over 90% of people, including most of those who are left-handed, have language skills that are primarily controlled by the left hemisphere. Most creative writers, then, utilize the left side of their brains to understand and create language. Engineers and scientists utilize the right side of their brains for visuospatial abilities to determine, for example, the layout of a building they are designing, or the structure of a cellular organelle. So although some people are more cognitively logical and others are more spontaneous or creative in style, this is not related to isolated function of the right or left hemispheres of the brain. The hemispheres of our brains are interconnected in an evenly distributed and incredibly complex way so that we can best process, interpret, and create. How does this information affect what is done in education? Well, when educators have an accurate understanding of how the brain works, they are better able to teach. Teachers shared how this information helps them to understand that they need to teach the whole child because emotions and logical thinking are tied together. By involving all parts of the brain in education, students will more easily retain information. For example, varying locations of study or simply changing the background noise in a room while teaching helps students to better embed the information within the brain's sensory layers, thus giving the brain more opportunity to revive what it can of the study conditions. Changing the context of study, then, engages all of the brain as it works to communicate between the various regions to store information. Moods, movement, and background music might help to increase where information such as vocabulary words, history dates, or math facts are stored. Even the process of taking notes by hand and then taking them again by typing on a keyboard causes the brain to work harder as it networks all this motor and sensory information. Additionally, when students understand how their brain works and that they are not just creative or logical, it significantly changes how they perceive themselves. They are not put into a box, instead being given educational and biological permission to develop and learn in all areas of study. As Dr. Robert Klitzman says, we cannot shut off half our brain, nor should we try to.